I remember the first night like it just happened. It was a Thursday. Cloudy sky, no stars. I had just started working night shifts as a security guard at an old industrial site on the edge of town. Used to be a cement factory, now just a hollow shell of concrete and rust. Management said the place had been closed for over a decade, but was being considered for demolition or sale. Until then, they needed someone to keep watch. I didn't think much of it. I needed the money. The guardhouse was a tiny box, just enough room for a desk, chair, radio, and an old monitor that displayed grainy feeds from the security cameras mounted around the compound. Most of the buildings were dark inside. No electricity except in the guard station and the lamp posts flickering outside. At 11:03 p.m., I heard my first strange sound. It was a knock, not on the door, but on the glass of the monitor itself. I froze. It sounded too real, too crisp to come from the inside of the screen. But I looked, nothing unusual. The cameras showed only empty corridors, broken windows, and stagnant darkness. I brushed it off. Midnight came. I got up to patrol. I had to check 4 checkpoints: the west gate, the storage silo, the admin building, and the basement entrance. The basement especially gave me a weird feeling. It had been sealed off, but the heavy metal door was still there. The company said not to go in. Structural risk, they claimed. At 12:37 a.m., while walking past the admin building, I heard something fall inside. I stopped, pulled out my flashlight, peered through the dusty window. Rows of desks, file cabinets, a typewriter, everything still. But one thing was off. One of the chairs was slowly spinning. I watched it for a long 10 seconds. Then it stopped. No wind, no animals, nothing. I returned to the guardhouse with a sense of unease in my chest, like a coil tightening. I wanted to believe it was just my nerves. First night jitters. Then at 1:14 a.m., the radio crackled. A voice came through. It wasn't clear, just breathing at first. Then a whisper. "Why did you wake us up?" I grabbed the receiver and answered, "Who is this?" Nothing, just static. I turned off the radio. That's when I noticed something on the screen. Camera 3, the hallway near the storage silo, had movement. A shadow crossed the frame, but there was no figure. Just the shadow moving across the wall, like it had its own life. I rewound the feed, trying to find the moment it appeared, but the footage glitched. It jumped from 1:14 to 1:21, like the file had been corrupted. 7 minutes gone. At 2:03 a.m., the lights outside the guardhouse flickered. I stepped out, lit a cigarette. The wind was dead still. Then I heard it, the sound of footsteps on gravel behind me, slow, deliberate. I spun around, nothing. The hairs on my neck were stiff. I stood there for a minute, trying to convince myself it was just paranoia. Then I saw it. One of the floodlights was swinging, even though there was no wind. Just one, swaying, like someone had walked under it. That night didn't end fast enough. I clocked out at 6 a.m., sun barely rising. Before leaving, I checked the monitor one last time. Camera 5 in the basement door showed something written in chalk. Words hadn't been there during my patrol. It said, "Don't ignore us." And I swear, as I turned to leave, the monitor flickered. For just a second, my reflection wasn't alone in the glass. I came back the next night with a flashlight, a thermos of coffee, and a creeping sense of dread. All day, I tried to convince myself that the things I'd seen weren't real. Just exhaustion, shadows, maybe even pranks. The factory was old. Maybe the wiring caused the flickering. Maybe the cameras glitched because of dust or interference. That was what I told myself. But I still brought a crucifix and wore it under my uniform. The night began quiet, too quiet. Not a single buzz from the radio, no wind rustling through the cracked windows. Even the crickets were silent. I sat in the guardhouse watching the monitors, trying to ignore how cold it felt even with my jacket zipped to the top. At 12:11 a.m., it began again. Camera 2, the hallway just outside the admin building, caught my attention. Something was off. A chair was facing the wall, the same chair that had spun the night before. I knew it had been facing the center of the room earlier. I had a habit of watching the chairs just because I hated how eerie empty desks looked. So I rewound the tape 5 minutes. Nothing. 10 minutes. Nothing. Then at the 12:04 mark, the chair scooted backward about 2 feet on its own. No one was there. I leaned closer to the monitor, goosebumps crawling up my spine. It was subtle, like someone had pulled it gently. I paused the feed, got up, went to the admin building to see it with my own eyes. The chair was where the camera had shown it, turned to face the wall, several feet away from the desk. But that wasn't the worst part. All the drawers of every desk in the room were now open. Every single one. Pulled out just enough to look like hands had rifled through them. The air in the room felt wrong, heavy, like something was watching me. I stepped closer to one of the desks, reaching out to push the drawer back in. But before I could touch it, the drawer slammed shut with a loud bang. I jumped back, heart pounding. The sound echoed in the empty space. Then another drawer slammed, and another. One by one, they closed. Bang, 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 until the last drawer at the far end of the room slid shut on its own. I didn't move. I just stared. Nothing visible, nothing natural. Just silence after the storm of noise. I backed out of the admin building slowly, flashlight shaking in my hand. As I stepped outside, the hallway light above me blinked once, then exploded with a sharp pop, glass sprinkling the floor near my boots. I hurried back to the guardhouse and locked the door. It was 12:38 a.m. The monitors flickered again. This time, it was the camera in the old break room. The one with the rusted vending machines and torn couches. I hadn't paid much attention to it before, but now, the vending machine door was hanging open. I squinted. No way. That thing hadn't worked in years. As I watched, one of the soda cans inside rolled forward, paused at the edge, then dropped to the floor with a metallic clunk. I saw it clearly. The machine was unplugged. There was no reason it could have opened by itself. I kept watching. A moment later, the can rolled across the floor in a perfectly straight line and stopped at the foot of the camera's view, almost like it was being offered to someone, or to me. I stood up, backed away from the monitor. I didn't want to see more. I didn't want to go check. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I grabbed my flashlight and walked across the yard toward the break room, every step slower than the last. When I opened the door, the air inside smelled old and metallic, like blood and rust. The can was still there, sitting quietly in the middle of the room. I walked in slowly, scanning everything. That's when I heard a sound behind me. Click. I turned. The door had shut on its own. And then, without warning, the vending machine began to shake violently, like something was trapped inside. The glass rattled, the entire frame groaned, and the light inside flickered wildly. I took a step back, heart racing. Then, all the cans inside were thrown out at once, shot across the room like they'd been hurled by invisible hands. One missed my head by inches, another slammed into the wall behind me, denting the plaster. I ran. I didn't look back. When I reached the guardhouse, I locked the door again and sat there until sunrise, staring at the monitors, afraid to blink. Nothing else moved for the rest of the night, but I knew one thing for sure. Something in that place wanted to be noticed, and now that I'd seen it, it wasn't going to stop. The next night I arrived early. The sun was just setting, casting long shadows across the empty factory grounds. I sat in my car for a few minutes before getting out, just staring at the main building. My fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel. I didn't want to go in, but I had to. When I unlocked the guardhouse, I noticed something immediately. The coffee mug I had left on the desk the night before was on the floor, perfectly upright, without a single drop spilled. Strange. I could have sworn I left it on the desk, but maybe I bumped it and didn't notice. I placed it back and sat down, turning on the monitors. Static flickered for a few seconds, then the usual grainy black and white images appeared. Broken staircases, long halls filled with shadows, the motionless silhouette of the admin chair, still turned to the wall. Hours passed with nothing. I almost let myself relax. At 1:06 a.m., I heard a soft tapping, not from outside, from inside the guardhouse. I turned slowly. The window behind me was fogging over, as if someone had breathed on it. Then, letters began to form in the condensation, as if traced by an invisible finger. W-A-T-Y-T-C-H. Then it stopped. I stood up. The door creaked a little behind me, even though it was shut tight. The room suddenly felt cold, much colder than before. My breath clouded in front of me. That's when the desk drawer slid open by itself. It moved slowly, almost politely, until it clicked to a stop. Inside was my notepad, flashlight batteries, and something new. A key. A small, rusted key I had never seen before. I picked it up. It was cold, almost sticky. A tag was tied to it with faded red string. On the tag, in smudged handwriting, were 3 letters. BLR. I didn't know what it meant. Maybe something from the basement? But I wasn't ready to go back down there. Not yet. Just as I set the key down, the radio crackled. Louder than before. Static tore through the silence. Then faintly I heard a sound that made my stomach turn. Furniture scraping across the floor. It was loud, echoing, repeated, rhythmic. I looked at the monitors. One of the office rooms, camera 6, showed a desk dragging itself across the tile, inch by inch, moving in short jerks. The chair spun behind it wildly as though caught in a storm. Then another desk started moving, and another. They were arranging themselves into a pattern. From above, it almost looked like letters. Help us. I stood, heart hammering. I didn't want to go out there, but I couldn't stay either. I backed away from the desk, and that's when the objects in the guardhouse began to move. The flashlight on the shelf rolled off and hit the floor. The chair I was just sitting in creaked and turned. The thermos slid an inch across the table, then another inch. My notepad flipped open by itself, pages fluttering in a wind that didn't exist. I pressed my back against the wall, watching as my radio lifted off the desk by 2 inches, then dropped with a loud thud. And then it all stopped, like it had never happened. Silence settled again. The room looked normal, but I wasn't. My hands were shaking. At 3 a.m., I gathered the courage to step outside and look around the compound one more time. Nothing moved. But when I returned to the guardhouse, I found one last thing waiting for me. My crucifix, in the one I wore under my uniform, was no longer around my neck. It was hanging from the ceiling light fixture, spinning slowly, like someone had placed it there deliberately. By the 4th night, I stopped pretending I was in control. Something was happening inside that factory. Something old and angry and aware. And for whatever reason, it had chosen me. I didn't sleep during the day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the chairs moving by themselves. The fogged window spelling, watch. The cross spinning like a pendulum in the air. I thought about quitting, but something wouldn't let me. Curiosity, maybe, or fear that if I left, whatever this thing was, it might follow. I showed up just before midnight, hands trembling as I unlocked the gate. The guardhouse felt colder than usual, even though the weather was mild. I took a deep breath and sat down, staring at the desk. The small, rusted key was still there. BLRI picked it up again, this time more deliberately. The metal seemed darker than I remembered, almost charred. When I gripped it, my hand twitched, like it didn't want to hold it, like it knew something I didn't. I turned to the cameras. All seemed quiet, until 12:47 a.m. Camera 9, a long unused hallway on the east wing, flickered. For a brief second, I saw movement. I rewound, played it again. There, a tricycle, just sitting in the hallway, bright red with peeling paint, facing the wall. That hallway had been cleared years ago. No toys, no equipment, no reason for a tricycle to be there. And yet, when I switched to live view, it was gone. I got up, flashlight in hand, and started walking toward the east wing. The hallway was colder than the rest of the compound. My boots echoed sharply against the cracked tile. I scanned the area but saw nothing, until I turned the corner. There it was, the tricycle, exactly as I saw it on the monitor. Red, peeling, sitting perfectly still. I stepped closer. My breath caught. There was a child's shoe underneath it. Just one. Small, dirty, as if it had been there for years. My flashlight flickered just once, and the tricycle moved only an inch. But it moved, I swear it did. The front wheel turned slightly, as if being steered. I backed away carefully, not taking my eyes off it. And then from the far end of the hall, I heard it. A voice, whispering, low and fast. Down below, down below. He locked us down below. I spun around. No one, nothing. But I knew what it meant. The basement, the only area I'd never dared to explore. I returned to the guardhouse and pulled up the blueprint of the facility, a worn-out map tucked in one of the drawers. There it was, BLR, basement level room. That's what the key was for. I stared at the key in my hand for a long time, my gut twisted, warning me. But I had to see. I waited until 3:33 a.m. Then I made my way to the old stairwell near the admin wing, where a metal door blocked access to the lower level. It was padlocked and rusted shut. I inserted the key. It turned with a slow click. As the lock dropped, the door creaked open with a sound like screaming metal. A wave of musty air hit me. Damp, sour, thick with mold and time. The darkness beyond was total. My flashlight barely pierced it. I started down the steps. Each footstep echoed like I was descending into something alive. And halfway down, I saw something carved into the concrete wall beside me. Faint but unmistakable. Don't wake them. I stopped. Suddenly behind me, at the top of the stairs, the door slammed shut. The lock clicked again. I was locked inside, and from deep below, something moved, something heavy, dragging across the basement floor. The darkness in the basement wasn't normal. It swallowed the flashlight's beam like smoke. Each step I took sounded too loud, like I was stepping on bones instead of concrete. The air grew heavier with every breath, damp, metallic, like old water and rusted blood. I held the flashlight tight, its weak beam trembling across the concrete walls. No sound, no light, just the hum of something wrong. Then suddenly, a door appeared at the end of the corridor. It was wooden, rotting at the edges with faint markings scratched into it. Symbols, a triangle with a line through it, a small handprint, a spiral. I reached for the handle. It was warm to the touch, as if someone had just held it from the other side. I opened it slowly. Inside was a storage room, or at least that's what it used to be. Now it looked more like a forgotten ritual site. Stacks of overturned furniture, filing cabinets, moldy mattresses, and scattered around the room, dozens of old toys. Not new, not recent. I'm talking about things from the 70s, maybe earlier. Rag dolls with missing eyes, tin wind-up robots, a rocking horse still swaying gently even though no one had touched it, and in the center of the room, a table, covered in children's drawings. They were taped to the wall, scattered across the floor, stuffed into cracks. Crayon sketches, most faded, but some still readable. A man with no face, a staircase dripping in black, little stick figures trapped in a square room, eyes drawn all over everything. I took a shaky breath, and then the flashlight went out. Click, complete darkness. I smacked it a few times. Nothing. The batteries were new. It should have worked. Then I heard it again, the sound of something being dragged. Closer this time. I stood frozen, listening, trying not to breathe too loud. The dragging stopped, just inches from the doorway behind me. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks on the wall. I turned, fumbling for my phone, trying to use its flashlight. The moment it turned on, I aimed it toward the door. Nothing. But one of the toys, the wind-up robot, was now facing me. Its key turned slightly on its own. Click, click, click. It began to walk. Whir, clunk, whir, clunk. I took a step back, heart slamming in my chest. Another toy started moving. A doll's head rotated 180 degrees, eyes painted wide and blank. Her tiny mouth opened, and I swear I heard a whisper from inside. Don't leave us. Suddenly, all around the room, the toys began moving. The horse rocked harder. The robots marched in broken rhythms. The dolls began to sing, off-key and distant, like a children's lullaby playing from an old cassette. Go to sleep, little one. Keep your eyes closed. Down here, the night will never end. And then, the drawings on the wall began to peel off on their own. One by one, they floated to the ground, revealing something beneath them. Names, carved deep into the concrete, dozens of them, children's names, and below each name, a date. But none of the dates went beyond 1983. I backed away slowly, shining my light around the room, desperate for an exit. That's when I noticed something new in the far corner. A door smaller than the others, partially hidden behind stacked furniture. I forced my way through and reached for the knob. It turned. It opened. And what I saw inside made me fall to my knees. It was a small cell, bare walls, no lights, and in the middle of the room, a circle of burnt handprints, as if dozens of children had pressed their palms to the floor before vanishing in flame. I stared, unable to move. Then I heard whispering again, but this time it wasn't coming from the walls or the toys. It was coming from inside my head. You opened the door. You brought us back. You hear us now. The flashlight buzzed once and died again, and in the dark I felt them, tiny fingers brushing my legs, tugging at my shirt, pulling at my keys, touching my skin. I screamed and ran, fumbling back through the hallway, slamming against walls, tearing my arm on broken metal. I reached the stairs and slammed my shoulder into the basement door. Locked, until suddenly, click, it opened on its own. I scrambled out and didn't stop running until I reached the guardhouse. I locked myself in, panting, shaking. The flashlight worked again, of course, as if nothing had happened. But when I looked in the mirror, there were handprints on my back, small, black, burned into my uniform. I called in sick the next day. No one answered. Not my supervisor, not the company line, no voicemail, just dead silence. It was as if the entire site had fallen off the grid. I wanted to walk away, just leave. But something about the names in that basement, the handprints, the whispers, I couldn't. Not yet. Something needed me to understand. That night, I arrived later than usual, around 1 a.m. I stood outside the guardhouse for a long time, key in hand, heart pounding. I didn't want to go in, but when I did, everything looked normal again. Too normal. No more moving objects, no whispers, no foggy windows, just silence. I almost thought it was over. Then I turned to the desk and froze. The drawings, the same children's crayon drawings I saw in the basement, they were laid out across my desk, perfectly arranged in a circle, exactly how they were taped to the walls below. I reached for the nearest one, a crude picture of a small child standing in fire, arms outstretched. Above him, written in shaky letters, "He watches when you don't." I shuffled back. My chair scraped the floor, and something answered. From the far corner of the room, the file cabinet began to rattle, softly at first, then violently, shaking like something inside wanted out. I backed toward the door, and the radio blared on. A voice, my voice, but it wasn't saying anything I remembered. It was screaming, repeating, "Don't look at him! Don't look at him! Don't look at him!" I yanked the battery out of the radio. Silence. The file cabinet stopped shaking, and then one of the drawers slowly slid open by itself. Inside was something that hadn't been there before. An old security badge. It was faded, yellowed with age. I picked it up and read the name. Miguel Alvarez, Night Patrol, issued 1979. I blinked. That name, I'd never heard of him. I checked the site records later. No one by that name. No mention in any database. But on the back of the badge, scratched in with something sharp, were 3 words. He found us. I stared at it for a long time. My reflection on the plastic surface looked distorted. My face didn't quite match. Then, the monitors flickered. All cameras went black. Then, one by one, they turned back on. Except now there was something in the footage. Each hallway, each stairwell, every camera angle, a chair, not just any chair, the same chair, the one from the admin room, the one that always faced the wall. Now it was everywhere, multiple versions of it, appearing in every part of the facility, as if the building was copying it, spreading it, and in each video feed, it rocked slightly, forward, back, forward, back. Then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., the feeds froze, and on every monitor a new image appeared. My face, eyes closed, mouth slightly open, as if I were sleeping or dead. Then the screen went black. A voice whispered from the radio speaker, even without batteries, "We like when you're still." The next morning I woke up on the floor of the guardhouse. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember sitting down. I checked the time, 8:12 a.m. I was supposed to leave at 6. I checked my phone. The battery was dead even though I'd charged it the night before. My watch, frozen at 3:33. I stood up feeling dizzy. My back ached like I'd been lying there for hours. On the desk, a cup of coffee sat, still steaming, but I didn't make it. There was a note next to it, handwritten in neat blocky letters. "Don't leave the chair alone tonight." No name, no context, just that one sentence. The chair. I turned to face the corner of the room. It was there, the same one from the cameras, old, wooden, facing the wall. But I was certain it hadn't been inside the guardhouse before. I approached it cautiously, no movement, no sound, just the creak of the floor beneath my boots. When I got close, I saw something new, a bracelet tied around one of the legs, a child's bracelet, beads spelling a name, Luisa. That name hadn't appeared in the basement, yet I felt like I knew her. A memory surfaced, but it wasn't mine. A birthday cake, pink candles, a girl laughing, then screaming. And the chair, always the chair. The memory vanished as fast as it came. I blinked, heart racing. What's happening to me? I checked the security logs for the night. The digital record showed I had clocked in twice, once at 12:03 a.m. and again at 2:19 a.m. That second clock in wasn't mine. I had never left the guardhouse. Worse, the system registered 2 separate key cards used, mine and one belonging to Miguel Alvarez. I stared at the screen, not blinking. I looked at the corner of the desk. His old badge was gone, replaced by something else, a Polaroid photo. In the photo, I was sitting in the guardhouse chair, head down, asleep, and standing behind me, barely visible in the dark, a tall figure, no face, one hand on my shoulder, the other holding the chair. I dropped the photo. My hands trembled. Suddenly, the room changed, just for a second. The walls turned darker, covered in burnt handprints again. The desk was gone. The window was cracked. The monitor showed static, then normal again. Everything in place. I breathed hard, trying to steady myself. But something had followed me back from that basement. I could feel it, not haunting the building, haunting me. And it was changing the space around me, altering time. That night, I set up a recorder, left it running from midnight to 6 a.m. When I reviewed the audio the next day, there was nothing for the first 3 hours. Then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., the tape filled with whispers, layered voices, all speaking at once. But one voice rose above them all, a child's, software, sad, tired. "Please, stop moving the chair. That's where we hide when he comes." I couldn't ignore the name anymore. Miguel Alvarez. He was the only other person who had seen what I was seeing, maybe even worse. I had to know more. I returned to the admin building during the day, a rare move for me, and snuck into the old record room on the 3rd floor. It was filled with dust and forgotten boxes. Many of them hadn't been touched in decades. I scanned through brittle files, moldy binders, outdated logbooks, and then I found it. A manila folder labeled in faded red ink, "Security Incident, Miguel A." Inside, there were 6 pages, heavily redacted. The first page was a report from October 12th, 1979. Miguel had reported strange disturbances during his night shifts, whispering in the stairwells, banging from locked storage rooms, and, most notably, a wooden chair that moved locations on its own. His last log entry chilled me to the bone. Chair was facing the boiler room again. No matter where I move it, it always finds its way back. I heard breathing from it tonight. Not mine. Then, nothing. No resignation letter, no death certificate, no forwarding address. He had simply vanished. There was something else in the folder, a Polaroid photograph. It showed the security office as it used to be. Older furniture, analog monitors. In the corner, the same chair, facing the wall. But if you look closely, you could see a blurry hand reaching out from under it. I flipped the photo over. There was a message etched into the film backing with something sharp. Don't let it turn around. That night, back in the guardhouse, I locked the door, turned off the lights, and placed the chair in the far corner, facing away from me. I propped a broom against its back so I'd hear if it moved. Then I waited. Nothing happened for hours, until exactly 3:33 a.m. The broom fell. The chair had turned 1 inch to the left. When the morning came, I left the guardhouse with shaking hands. Outside, the world looked normal. The sun rose like nothing had happened. But something had. That day, I saw things that shouldn't exist. My reflection in the mirror blinked out of sync with my real eyes. When I reached into my locker, there was a child's shoelace tied in a perfect bow around my flashlight. I don't know how it got there. When I opened the patrol log to make my daily notes, I found pages written in handwriting that wasn't mine. They said things like, "You're sitting where he sat. The chair doesn't like to be ignored. He was here, you are next. And the worst one, she's under the chair." I didn't want to believe it, but I had to know. That night, I waited until after midnight and shined my flashlight underneath the chair. At first, just shadows. Then, movement. A lock of jet black hair, swaying, barely visible. I dropped the flashlight. It clattered to the floor. I backed away, but the chair rocked forward slowly on its own. Creak! Creak! Then it stopped, and something behind me whispered, right against my ear, "Sit." I froze. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my throat. I turned slowly. No one was there, but the chair was now facing me, like it had waited long enough. I don't know why I did it. Maybe exhaustion, maybe desperation, maybe it had been pulling me all along. I sat down. The moment I did, the air around me shifted. Everything felt wrong, heavier. I blinked, and I wasn't in the guardhouse anymore. I was in a narrow corridor, lined with walls made of concrete and rusted metal. The lights flickered like a failing hospital. Dozens of doors lined each side. Each one creaked open as I passed, revealing glimpses of rotted toys, blood-stained shoes, and chairs. Always chairs, identical to the one I sat in. In one room, I saw Miguel, or what was left of him, his face half shadow, half skeleton. He pointed to a black mark on the wall, like a handprint, but burned in. Then he whispered, "It keeps us here. You have to break it before it breaks you." When I woke up, it was 6:01 a.m. The chair was back in the corner, still, silent. But this time, there were 3 new scratches carved into the wooden floor, each one pointing toward me. After that night, I tried to go back to normal. I stopped staying late at the guardhouse. I ignored the creaks, the shadows, the whispers. I told myself it was just the stress. Too many long shifts, too many sleepless nights. But it followed me. It started small. I came home one evening and found my dining room chair turned away from the table, facing the wall. I lived alone. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe I'd bumped it earlier. Maybe I forgot. The next night I came back to find 2 chairs turned. By the end of the week, every chair in my apartment, dining chairs, desk chair, even a folding stool, was facing a wall, and I never moved them that way. One morning I woke up to find a wooden splinter on my pillow. It wasn't from any furniture I owned. Then came the dreams. I would see the chair in my sleep, rocking gently in the corner of my room, even though it wasn't really there. Sometimes someone sat in it, a little girl. Sometimes a man with no face. and other times no one. Just the sound of something breathing heavily near my ear, even as I slept. I started filming. I set up a camera in my living room and left it running overnight. The footage showed nothing for the first 2 hours. Then, at 3:33 a.m., movement. The chair moved on its own, slowly, deliberately, turning to face the camera. Then, it rocked once and stopped. The feed went to static for the next 10 minutes. When it returned, the chair was empty, but my bedroom door, which had been closed, was now wide open. I went to work that morning, exhausted, eyes sunken. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Inside the guardhouse, the wooden chair was back in its usual place. But something was different. There was now a mirror propped up against the wall. I didn't put it there. No one claimed to. In the reflection, I could see myself and something else. Something behind me, standing still, watching. But when I turned around, nothing. When I looked again, it was closer. I took the mirror outside and smashed it against the concrete. But in its shattered pieces, just for a second, I saw the chair again. Not in the guardhouse, in my bedroom, waiting. I had to know who she was. The little girl in the chair. She wasn't just a ghost. She was part of something older, deeper, and I was starting to suspect she wasn't haunting the chair. She was bound to it. I returned to the records room. The folder about Miguel had mentioned a tricycle found in the building repeatedly, even though no children were ever allowed on the premises. That detail stuck with me, so I started looking into accidents, things the company might have buried. I combed through local newspaper archives, dusty microfilms in the town library, and unofficial employee testimonies. And finally, buried beneath an old fire report from 1974, I found something, a child's death. Her name was Lucia Ramirez, age 7, daughter of a maintenance worker who sometimes brought her to the site during night shifts. She went missing one night, last seen near the boiler room. They never found her body, but they did find her tricycle, perfectly placed in front of the furnace, as if someone had carefully set it there. The article said the area had been sealed off. No criminal charges were filed. The company quietly removed the boiler room from all updated blueprints, as if trying to erase her. I returned to the guardhouse that night. The chair was in its usual place, but something was different. There was a child's drawing tucked under its leg. I picked it up carefully, crayon on construction paper. It showed a stick figure sitting in a chair, surrounded by what looked like tall black shapes. No eyes, no mouths, just towering shadows. At the bottom was a name in red crayon, Lucia. And then the lights went out. Total darkness. The temperature dropped so quickly my breath clouded the air. A soft creaking sound began. The chair, rocking, but this time it was fast, urgent, like something trapped. I reached for my flashlight, but before I could turn it on, I heard it, a child's voice, right behind me, software sad, angry. He told me to sit, then he left me there. I turned around slowly, heart thudding in my chest. The chair had stopped rocking, but in it sat the figure of a little girl, head bowed, hands gripping the armrest tightly, nails clawing at the wood. When she looked up, her eyes were entirely black. Tears of ash streaked down her face. And then she whispered, "Now you know. So now you stay." The guardhouse door slammed shut on its own, locked from the inside, and the chair began to turn. Not by itself this time, with me still sitting in it. I woke up on the floor. My back ached. My head pounded. Blood trickled from my nose. The chair stood quietly in the corner, but I could still hear it, breathing. Somehow it had kept me there all night, not with chains, not with ropes, but with something worse. Guilt. The image of Lucia sitting there, hollow-eyed, played on a loop in my mind. Her words haunted me. Now you know. So now you stay. That day, even when I left the building, I didn't feel free. At home, I found scratches on my arms, deep, symmetrical, as if tiny fingers had gripped me in my sleep. I bandaged them, told myself it was stress, sleepwalking, anything. But I couldn't lie to myself anymore when I began waking up in places I didn't remember going to. Once in my kitchen, on the floor, with every chair in the apartment circling me, all facing inward. Once in the stairwell of my building, sitting in the exact same position I had in the guardhouse chair. And then the worst time. In the middle of the night, I woke up and couldn't move. Sleep paralysis? Maybe, but I was sitting upright, in a chair, a wooden chair that didn't belong to me, and someone was whispering right behind me. But I couldn't turn my head. They just kept repeating one sentence over and over. "You took his place." I forced myself to move, finally breaking free with a gasp. I fell to the floor. The chair was gone, but there was a trail of small, dusty footprints leading from my bedroom door to where it had stood. The next day, I went back to the site. I needed answers, something I could fight. I went to the sealed boiler room mentioned in the accident file. It had been boarded up and plastered over, forgotten, but the boards were loose. I pried them off one by one, hands trembling. Inside, darkness, and a single object in the center of the room, the chair, the same one from the guardhouse. But how? I stared at it. It stared back. Then, without warning, the door behind me slammed shut. The temperature dropped, and the chair began to drag itself toward me, inching, groaning, scraping the cement. A voice filled the room, both inside my ears and behind my eyes. One must always sit. I backed away, but the room had grown smaller, or I had. The chair kept coming. When I escaped, it was morning. I don't remember how I got out. I just remember vomiting in the parking lot and crying until my vision blurred. I'm not sure what's real anymore, but I know this. The chair is always moving, and it's getting closer to where I sleep. Let me know when you're ready for Chapter 13, where you'll attempt to destroy the chair and discover it's not just haunted, it's alive. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to destroy the chair, not trap it, not avoid it, not pray it would disappear. Destroy it. So I made a plan. I waited until the end of my shift, just before sunrise, when the guardhouse was dead silent. Then I dragged the chair outside. It felt heavier than it should, like it resisted me with every step. Its legs scraped loudly along the concrete like nails on a chalkboard. When I finally reached the clearing behind the maintenance lot, I poured lighter fluid all over it, every inch. I soaked it. Then I lit a match. For a moment, nothing happened. Then flames erupted, bright, angry orange. I stepped back and watched it burn. But instead of cracking and collapsing like normal wood, the chair screamed. A high-pitched, shrill wail like metal being torn apart, or a child shrieking in agony. The flames turned blue, dancing violently around the frame. And then, it stopped. The fire vanished. No smoke, no ashes. The chair stood untouched. Exactly the same, except now it was facing me. I stepped back, heart hammering. That was impossible. Wood doesn't survive fire like that. But this wasn't wood anymore. This thing wasn't just cursed, it was feeding off me. Later that night, back at home, I noticed something horrifying. On the inside of my forearm, where I once found scratches, now there was something new. A mark, not a scar, a burn, in the shape of the chair's backrest, almost like a brand. I scrubbed it, tore at it. Nothing worked. That's when I realized it had chosen me. I started hearing voices in places I never had before. On the bus, in the grocery store, even while walking through crowds. But they weren't people. They were mimics, repeating phrases I'd heard in the guardhouse. Sit down. Don't let it turn around. One must always sit. And then one new voice, a woman's whisper. It used to be a man. That sentence paralyzed me. I returned to the site again, deeper this time, into the old maintenance archives, untouched for years. In a dusty file box, I found a black and white photo unmarked. It showed a man strapped to a chair, not tied but fused. His arms and legs had grown into the wood, his face distorted in agony, his eyes wide. He looked like he had been screaming for decades. And the chair, it was the same, no doubt. I turned the photo over. A handwritten note said, "He tried to leave. Now the wood remembers him." Suddenly, everything made sense. The chair wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was the ghost, the body, the soul, everything trapped inside. and now it was looking for a new host. When I looked up from the photo, I felt something behind me. I turned. There, standing in the doorway of the archive room, was the chair. No one carried it. It had come on its own. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I just ran from the archives, through the service hallway, past the security booth. But the sound followed me. Tap, tap, tap. The scraping of wooden legs against concrete. It wasn't rushing. It didn't need to. It knew I couldn't outrun it. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of sitting. Not in a place, not in a room, just sitting, forever, and around me others. Hundreds of people, all fused to chairs, their bodies mangled, their mouths frozen open in silent screams. None of them could move. They didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared forward into eternity. And at the center of them all, one empty chair, waiting, rocking slowly. I woke up gasping, soaked in sweat, and I couldn't move my arms. They were pressed tightly to the armrests of the chair I'd fallen asleep in. But I hadn't fallen asleep in a chair. I'd gone to bed, hadn't I? Things got worse. I started missing time. Hours gone. I'd blink and suddenly be at work, or standing outside my apartment in the dark. I began speaking in my sleep. My neighbors told me they heard me through the walls at 3 a.m., whispering things in Spanish, a language I barely spoke. Words like, él me obligó, siéntate, yo era como tú, he made me, sit down, I was like you. One morning I woke up and couldn't feel my legs. I tried to stand. I collapsed. Panic surged through me. I looked down. There were splinters embedded in my thighs, dozens of them, pressed in just beneath the skin, like roots trying to take hold. And the soles of my feet were cracked, lined like old wood. I crawled to the bathroom, trembling, tears blurring my vision. In the mirror, my eyes looked wrong, cloudier, stiffer. And behind me, in the reflection only, the chair stood in the hallway, watching, always watching. I stopped going to work. I stopped answering the phone. I sealed my bedroom door, nailed it shut, and slept on the floor. But still, every time I woke up, I was in the chair. No matter what I did, where I lay down, I always woke up sitting, and each time it was harder to get up. That night I recorded myself sleeping. I set up the camera, pointed it toward my bed, and forced myself to stay awake until I collapsed from exhaustion. When I watched the footage the next morning, I felt cold to my core. At 2:49 a.m., I sat up straight in bed, eyes wide open, blank. Then I stood, walked to the corner of the room, out of frame. 30 seconds later, I returned, carrying the chair. I placed it in the center of the room, sat in it, and smiled. Not my smile, not my face, but mine. I haven't slept since. I don't know how much longer I can stay awake. The chair is always here now. It doesn't need to be moved anymore, because I'm always sitting in it, even when I'm standing. I feel it in my spine, in my breath, in my mind, and I know deep down, if I fall asleep one more time, I won't wake up. I was losing myself. I hadn't slept in 4 days. My reflection no longer followed my movements in real time. Shadows seemed to flicker even in the light. And everywhere I went, I saw chairs, ordinary ones. But they looked at me. I needed help. Not from a priest, not from a scientist, from someone who had been through it. Remember the photo I found in the archives? The man fused to the chair? There was something off about it. The face wasn't dead. It was in pain, yes, but the eyes were aware. I took that photo to a retired archivist who used to work for the facility, an old woman named Senora Beltran, who now lived in a small home near the forest edge. When I showed her the picture, her hand trembled, and then she whispered, "He didn't die." I froze. She looked me in the eye and said, "They said he did, but they lied. He's still alive, and he'll talk to no one but someone who's been touched by the chair." She gave me an address, a halfway house for mentally ill men, 2 towns over. I didn't hesitate. His name was Raul Estevez, age 71, eyes wide, bloodshot, haunted. He sat in a wheelchair, alone in a white room with no furniture, not even a folding chair. When I stepped into the room, he didn't look at me at first. He only spoke when I said softly, "It's following me too." Then his head snapped toward me like a puppet. He grinned, not with joy but recognition. And he said, "You're not sitting in it yet, are you?" I told him everything. The chair, the dreams, the marks, the voices. He listened in silence, then replied, "It doesn't kill you, it wears you." Raul told me the chair was born from a punishment ritual, an execution chair used in a secret military facility decades ago. But it absorbed something more than death. It absorbed memory, emotion, regret. The man it devoured first was an officer who tortured prisoners and died screaming. But his guilt, his rage, his need to confess, it stayed in the wood. He became part of it. Each time someone sits, Raul said, it chooses. If you're broken enough, guilty enough, it keeps you. The rest it haunts until they break. He leaned closer. You're being tested. If you keep resisting, it will ruin you. If you give in, he trailed off. What happens if I burn it? I asked. He laughed on a raw, barking laugh. You already tried, didn't you? I nodded. Then it's too late. He leaned in, his voice low and cracked. There's only one way to stop it. I waited, breath held. Raul stared through me. You have to sit, willingly, but not for yourself. Before I could ask what that meant, Raul began screaming, eyes rolling, hands flailing, convulsing in the chairless room. Orderlies ran in and sedated him, and as they wheeled me out, I swear I saw it. His legs weren't touching the wheelchair. They hovered slightly above it, as if he refused to sit in anything ever again. That night, I returned home, and in my living room, in the center of the floor, the chair, waiting. The chair stood in my living room like it had always belonged there. I didn't question how it got in. Doors didn't matter anymore. Walls didn't either. It was always going to find me. I remembered Raul's words. You have to sit willingly, but not for yourself. That phrase kept echoing in my skull, like a riddle waiting to unfold. Not for myself. What does that mean? I sat across from it, eyes locked with the thing, because it was a thing now, no longer just furniture. It breathed, it listened, and I swear to God, it blinked. I spent the next day researching old military records, torture chambers, sacrificial rites, places where people were forced to sit and wait for death. A pattern emerged. Every cursed chair had one thing in common. Someone long ago sat unwillingly, and their pain needed a mirror, someone else to suffer by choice. It wasn't about killing, it was about balance. So I made a decision. I would sit, but not for me. I took the chair back to the site, the clearing behind the building, the same place I tried to burn it. I brought candles, salt, symbols. I wasn't sure they'd help, but I needed intention. I needed it to know that I understood now. As I stood in the circle of light, the wind died. The forest went still, and the chair faced me. I'm not running anymore, I said aloud. I know what you want. I stepped forward, slowly. I'll sit, but not because you made me. I'll sit for him. I pulled the old photo from my pocket, the one of the man whose body had fused to the wood. I see you, I remember you. And then I sat, fully, calmly. A silence fell. No screams, no movement, just peace. Then heat, not from outside, from inside me. My chest tightened, my breath caught, my legs burned. The chair began to creak and groan, the wood shifting beneath me like it was alive. The sky darkened, and then I heard the voice again, this time inside my skull. Thank you. It wasn't rage. It wasn't possession. It was relief. Something inside the chair let go. A deep, ancient sigh that rippled through the forest like wind in dead branches. Then the wood beneath me cracked, not from pressure, but from release. The chair splintered at the base, the joints breaking apart. I jumped back, heart pounding. The pieces of the chair collapsed to the ground and burned on their own. No lighter fluid, no matches, just a slow, peaceful fire. No screams, no blue flames, just silence. That night I slept in my own bed. No dreams, no voices, no movement. Just sleep. Real sleep. But at 3:07 a.m., I woke up. Not in a panic, just alert. And I swear I heard it. A voice. Not angry, not hateful, just lonely. There are more. A week passed. No nightmares, no voices, no shifting furniture or missing time. For the first time in months, I felt free. But peace is a fragile illusion. It was a Tuesday when I got the letter. No return address, just my name, typed in bold on the front. Inside was a photo, grainy, black and white, like from an old security cam. It showed a room, large, concrete floors, no windows, and in that room were dozens of chairs, lined up in perfect rows, wooden, plastic, metal, high back, broken, intact. And in each one, a person. Some slumped, some stiff, all unmoving. On the back of the photo, a single line. Only one was set free. I thought it was a prank at first, but when I flipped the photo over again, my heart stopped. Because one of the figures, in the far back, was Raul. Same hospital gown, same twisted grin, and he was smiling at the camera. I returned to Senora Beltran. When I showed her the photo, her skin turned pale. She stared for a long time before whispering, "They kept the others." I asked who they were. She shook her head. The ones who built the chair, the ones who made it that way. Government, military, maybe worse. They used guilt like fuel, pain like currency. Then she told me something I'll never forget. What you freed was one spirit, one story. There are hundreds more. Each chair is a cage. That night, I looked at every chair in my apartment, my kitchen stool, my desk chair, even the old rocking chair I got from my grandfather. They all seemed still, but now I couldn't unsee it, the way they leaned slightly toward me, waiting. That's when I made a decision. If there were more, I had to find them, not to destroy them, but to free the people still trapped inside. I began making calls, old colleagues, paranormal investigators, conspiracy theorists, anyone who might have seen furniture that moved on its own. And I found stories, a chair that always returned to the center of the room, no matter where it was placed. A nursing home where patients aged rapidly after sitting in the same recliner. A child's booster seat that made every toddler who used it speak in the same deep voice. One in Detroit, one in Spain, one on a cargo ship lost at sea. All different shapes, different origins, same effect. And each time I heard the stories, I felt it again. The low hum in my bones, like a distant vibration. The same hum I felt in the presence of that chair. It wasn't over. It had never been over. That chair was only one chapter in a book filled with screams. Now when I sleep, I don't dream of the forest anymore. I dream of a warehouse, dimly lit, and in it, 1,000 chairs. Some empty, some watching, and one by one, they turned toward me, waiting. The town was called Mill Creek, a dot on the map, forgotten by time. Population 91. I came because of a message, left on my voicemail at 2:13 a.m., a child's voice, barely audible, whispering, "Help me, I'm still inside." The line crackled, and then a sound that made my skin crawl, chalk scratching violently against a blackboard. I traced the call to a landline, disconnected for over 20 years. The address led me to an abandoned elementary school on the edge of town. Boarded windows, rusted gates, and a sign still hanging above the door. Mill Creek Primary, where children grow. Inside, the halls were frozen in time. Faded posters lined the walls. The smell of mildew and rot clung to everything. But there was something else in the air. Sadness, a heavy, suffocating weight, like the air itself remembered crying. I found room 4B at the end of the hall, chairs overturned, lockers dented, but one desk stood upright in the center of the room. Small, rusty legs, old chewing gum underneath, and on top of it, a name scratched deeply into the wood, Tommy. I felt it before I touched it. The hum, the low vibration in my spine, like standing near power lines. I didn't sit. Instead, I leaned in, whispered, "I'm here to help." And then, the lights flickered. Even though there was no power, the blackboard behind me filled with fresh chalk lines by invisible hands. It wrote, "You took the chair, now you take the desk." And then the room slammed shut. I turned. The door was gone. Not closed. Gone. As if it had never existed. Then came the scratching from inside the desk, not beneath it, inside. I knelt down and listened. A voice. I didn't mean to cheat. I didn't mean to lie. Soft sobs followed. I lifted the lid. Nothing inside but a dusty, empty cavity. But the voice got louder. "They locked me in. Said I had to stay till I told the truth. But I told the truth. I did. I did." Suddenly, my hands froze. I wasn't holding the desk anymore. It was holding me. The lid slammed shut. My fingers were trapped. Not physically, but emotionally. I saw images in my mind. A little boy, maybe 9, sitting at that desk as 3 adults loomed over him, screaming, accusing, demanding a confession for something he didn't do. He refused. They left him locked in the room for days. No food, no light, just his thoughts. And then silence. He never left. But his guilt did. It stayed behind. I reached out, whispering again, "Tommy, you didn't do anything wrong." The chalkboard responded in frantic scrawls. "Liar, liar, liar, liar." I shouted, "Then show me." Silence. Then the desk began to shift. Its legs scraped across the floor toward the corner of the room. And there, beneath a loose tile, was a tiny skeleton curled beneath a school blanket. No report, no burial, just forgotten. Abandoned, like he never existed. I returned to the desk and sat. The air turned cold. The whisper returned, "Are you sitting for me?" I nodded and said, "You can go now. You're not alone anymore." The chalkboard wiped itself clean. The room brightened, and the desk fell silent. The door reappeared behind me. When I left the school, the sun had risen, and somewhere far behind me, I swear I heard a little boy laughing. The old mansion was tucked away on a forgotten hill, wrapped in twisting ivy and shadows. Locals called it the Judgment House. Rumor had it a cruel judge once ruled there, a man who passed sentence without mercy, who thrived on fear and punishment. The centerpiece of the mansion's parlor was a massive wooden throne, carved with faces twisted in agony. No one dared sit in it. They said those who tried were never the same again. I found the mansion after weeks of searching, guided by a faded journal I uncovered in a library archive. The entries spoke of a judge named William Hargrave, infamous for sentencing dozens to death on flimsy evidence. And this throne was his seat of power. Inside, the air was thick with dust and regret. The throne stood beneath a cracked chandelier, its wood dark and polished, the carvings almost alive in the flickering candlelight. I approached, heart pounding. This was different from the others. This chair wasn't just haunted. It was angry. It demanded justice, or at least what it believed was justice. I sat. Immediately the room shifted. The walls seemed to close in. Whispers echoed. Voices of the condemned, crying out. The throne dug into my skin like splinters of cold steel. And then the judge spoke, not with words, with visions. I saw trials, unjust, cruel, unfair. Faces pleading for mercy. The gavel fell. The innocent suffered. The throne was a prison, not for the dead, but for the guilt, for the judgment passed without conscience. And now it sought to judge me, to decide if I was guilty. The visions twisted, showing my own darkest moments, mistakes I'd tried to forget, regrets buried deep. The chair forced me to confront them all. Then came the choice: confess, accept judgment, or be consumed by the throne's wrath forever. I whispered my truths aloud. Each one weighed heavy. The throne's grip loosened. The whispers faded, and then the room brightened. The judge's voice was gone. When I stood, the throne cracked, not broken, but changed. No longer a symbol of cruelty, but a reminder of the power of truth. I left the mansion, but the weight of judgment lingered. The chair wasn't just a curse, it was a test. After all I'd endured, the haunted chair, the desk of Tommy, the judge's throne, one truth remained clear. These seats were connected, pieces of something ancient, a force that fed on guilt, regret, and fear. I knew I had to find its source. My search led me to an old mansion on the outskirts of town. Locals whispered about the Hall of Lost Chairs, a place where all cursed seats were gathered, a shrine to pain and punishment. The door creaked open. Inside, dozens of chairs lined the walls. Each one pulsed with a dark energy. The air was thick with voices. At the center was a throne unlike any I'd seen. Black wood twisted like roots. An iron crown hung over it, glowing faintly. I approached. The room pulsed with a heartbeat. Then it spoke, not in words. A cold wind filled my mind with memories. My own fears, mistakes, and secrets laid bare. The force was testing me. "Sit," it whispered. I hesitated, but I knew I had no choice. I sat. The throne embraced me like a vice. Visions flooded me. Faces of those trapped by their own guilt. Whispers of the dead. Then I understood. This force was neither evil nor good. It was a judge of souls, feeding on the burdens people carried, but it could be reasoned with. I spoke, not with fear, but with acceptance, with truth, with the promise to free those trapped, to carry their stories. The throne shuddered, the voices quieted, the room brightened. One by one, the chairs around me cracked and shattered. I stood alone, free. But as I left, a whisper followed me. There will always be another seat and another soul to sit. The cursed chairs remain, but so does hope. Because sometimes to break a curse, you must first sit with your own shadows.